So Riven is a 1997 point-and-click puzzle adventure game developed by the same people who made Myst, Cyan. Sorry, I think you misclicked. It takes a much more realistic and grounded approach to the fantasy world it's set in, and I love it, and it's beautiful, and nobody talks about it. Somebody has to talk about Riven! But I can't really talk about Riven, at least until I've talked about Myst first. Myst came out in 1993 and sent shockwaves through the gaming industry, challenging what a game should look and play like. It's a textbook example of puzzle design and world building, and how the two concepts can rely on and enrich each other. Look at this, you see a letter for someone else, you read it, look around a little bit, and you're like, oh, it's talking about these. Eventually you see this message that was also sent to this Catherine, and it gives you a clue on how to interact with the island, and then those interactions teach you how to explore further, etc., until the game is over. Solving puzzles in Myst requires you to understand the world you're walking around in. This isn't a puzzle that the devs made, it's how the people of this world powered their technology. And then you can read about those people in the journal written by the guy who fell down the hole in the intro, whose book you used to teleport here. What I'm getting at is that in Myst, nothing exists in isolation. Everything is intentional, and you should use everything you learn to help you beat the game. Of course, there are some normal puzzles, like figuring out the proper voltage, or choose the correct symbols, or get the numbers right, but they're all framed by that intro sequence and that message. These aren't just puzzles, they're safety measures. Defenses put in place by Fallen Guy to make sure that these worlds don't fall to pillagers. Now the lore behind Myst is extensive, but much like a From Software game, if you're familiar, you don't need an intimate knowledge of the lore in order to enjoy the game, to solve its puzzles, to get the best ending. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this game has 4 endings and only one of them is good. All of this adds up to Myst being an absurdly complete puzzle game, especially for its time, and I think that it got the recognition that it deserved. Myst was the best-selling PC game in the world for 6 years, and has since gotten a mountain of ports, remasters, remakes, and, relevantly, sequels. The first of these, in my opinion, not only surpassed the original in every conceivable category, but cemented itself as the gold standard for puzzle adventure games. It's also an absolute motherfucker. Riven's presentation is almost identical to Myst's. You are some guy and you click around to solve puzzles to protect the world from evildoers. That world is broken up into smaller segments with their own self-contained puzzles that all involve interaction with the world in some way. But in Riven, there's a new impetus behind your actions. Instead of Atris narrating what already happened, we are the thing that is happening. Atris needs our help.
I need your help.
We need to capture the bad guy, Gen, and save Catherine, who you actually get to meet in this game. If you're an avid fan of the first game, which, if you're playing the sequel, you probably are, you've heard the name Catherine a few times, and you understand how important she is to Atris. Just based on that information, you have significantly more external motivation than you did in Myst to figure out the world of Riven. And this is a world that is begging to be figured out. Disparate islands with their own unique visuals and purposes, each hiding their own secrets and hidden rooms, giant knives and swords and axes buried in the rock like some giant in the sky hurled them away 1,000 years ago. Water shoved aside by red-hot metal to make room for an impossible railway through the sea. And filling in the gaps between all of that, people. With implied allegiances, motivations, and fears, all trying to live or even prevail on the decaying corpse of a broken world. Riven is a deeply curious place, not just because of its puzzles, but because of what it is, what you see, and what you do. And that's one of the most crucial elements for the success of Riven. Why would you, the player of the game, want to save a boring world? get familiar with its systems, even just solve its puzzles. But Riven isn't boring. It's fascinating and imaginative and fully realized. There's your internal motivation. Riven is a world that you, the player of the game, want to discover. Of course, this element of wonder was also present in Myst, but Riven runs laps around it in terms of presentation, and that can be attributed to two things. One, Riven's budget was like 10 times that of Myst, and two, one of the game's directors, Richard van der Wende, is an ILM and Disney alum. The thing that he does for money is to make sure that what you're looking at isn't only beautiful, but also cohesive and verisimilitudinous. What would a massive temple-like dome be built out of? How many supports would a maglev track need over the ocean? How would you realistically build an entire village out of wood and stucco into the side of a cliff? How big do you need your wood chipper and boiler to be to convey an industrial-scale paper-making operation? Moreover, how do you expect to power the whole thing? Video game logic? Or do you work a steam power system into every nook and cranny of the world? These are the decisions a game designer has to make to anchor their world in reality. It's always easier for a player to immerse themselves in a game when it looks kinda like the world they already live in. And it's even easier when it kinda works the same too. This might seem intuitive or obvious to you, but remember that every decision you make when building a game has to be intentional. Riven looks real because the designers put a lot of time and money and effort and intentionality into making it look that way. The trade-off, of course, is that besides some interactive elements and transition scenes and some live-action cutscenes, the game is a slideshow. This isn't particularly unique for point-and-click adventure games, but it's still worth noting that the reason Riven looks so good for 1997 is because everything in it is either pre-rendered or filmed. This limited interactivity does make it a bit more difficult to engage with the world of Riven, but interestingly, it makes it a lot easier to play the game of Riven, and that's actually one of the secrets to Myst's success as well. So let's talk about what it's like to play the game of Riven. You click. Everything you do in this game is triggered by the pressing of the left mouse button. This control scheme is both simple and easy, making the game immediately approachable from a gameplay standpoint. There are no controls that you need to learn, and that frees the game from the tyranny of tutorials. Now, there's nothing wrong with tutorials, they're often necessary, but that doesn't keep them from being completely anti-immersive. When a game tells you press this button to do this thing, you are not the person in the game, you are back in your own body, teaching your finger how to perform the real-life analog for a virtual action. Riven does away with that entirely, relying on the player's innate knowledge to control their actions in its world. And that's good, because if the controls were any more difficult to grasp, the puzzles in this game would graduate from nightmarish to completely f***ing impossible. By being so hands-off with the ludic aspect of Riven, it becomes all but impenetrable. It gives you a yellow brick road of accessibility with its controls, leading to a solid brick wall of its puzzles. A lot of this is due to the number of interactable objects in Riven that don't matter, that merely exist to fill out Riven's world. And herein lies the meta puzzle of Riven. What do you need to care about? What do you need to remember? What will help you beat the game? You may find yourself trying to solve a puzzle that you just invented in your own head, that the game never recognized or intended to be a puzzle at all. And you may think an actual puzzle has certain criteria that you need to meet, when it's actually just some on-off switches. Conversely, you might decide that something has no relevance to anything when it's actually the most important thing in the game and you won't be able to beat it without it. See, in a normal puzzle game, you have a sequence of puzzles with some fundamental mechanics that increase in complexity and introduce new mechanics as you progress. This structure allows for the development of dozens of self-contained puzzles in a single game, and the potential for infinitely more by remixing existing mechanics. In Riven there are 3 puzzles. Only one of them makes sense, the first one might be the hardest, and it's up to you to figure out which pieces belong to which puzzle. So let's take a look at them. The first puzzle is established right at the start, before you can even control yourself. You have to get the prison book back so you can capture Gen. That is the puzzle's only objective, and solving it requires traversing the entire world multiple times, learning about the active conflict between Riven's rebels and Gen's loyalists, getting familiar with Riven's number system, interacting with the wildlife, and solving all the mini-puzzles strewn around the world like the spinning room, the submarine, the boiler, the frog trap, etc., etc. I call these mini-puzzles because they aren't really presented as puzzles, more like isolated mechanisms that you just need to teach yourself how to use effectively. Getting your book back is a true puzzle, one that requires the right pieces to be placed in the right order. It's also a puzzle in the world itself, an intentional layer of obfuscation between Riven's factions that can only be solved by those in the know. However, much like Myst, there are intentional clues scattered across the world of Riven to help guide you toward the puzzle solution. The problem that is unique to Riven is that these clues are so abstract that you might not be able to figure out how they all fit together, or even if all these pieces belong to this puzzle. And that's partially because the final pieces of this puzzle are literal abstractions, stylized drawings of animals encountered throughout your journey. These drawings admittedly do distinguish themselves when compared to each other, but they're still individually interpretable. Like I said, even if you did figure out where to go, what the symbols on the wooden eyes mean, and how they relate to these animals, you can still get the final step wrong and have no idea why. And that might make you think that you missed something when you actually didn't, and you'll retread all your steps when you never had to leave the room. It's definitely one of the most frustrating puzzles I've had to deal with in the video game medium. But it's also somehow one of the most satisfying to solve. I think it's because of just how invested in the world you have to be to solve it. How many seemingly random tidbits of information come together to lead you to one specific place and input one short sequence of symbols. The cherry on top being Rand Miller's excellent score announcing to you in no uncertain terms, you did it. You get to solve the next puzzle. It's actually a lot simpler though. All you have to do is learn which pattern of squares correspond to which island, figure out how to access Gen's survey room, learn the color associated with each island's energy signature, one of which you can't see, note the position of the spinning domes for each island on this 3D map, one of which is underground, hope that any of this is relevant because again some things aren't, then use this information to place some colored marbles on a grid with 625 possible spots, make the connection completely on your own that you just powered up the spinning domes, and finally input Gen's secret code of alien numbers into one of them. Yeah, this one kinda sucks. So this puzzle is all about accessing the age that Gen operates from so you can capture him. You learn that linking to it requires a substantial amount of power and that it has something to do with fire marbles, whatever they are. The game doesn't tell you a lot about this puzzle, so really all you have to go on is whatever wasn't involved with the previous puzzle. What that means in the context of Riven, though, is nebulous, because you can access like 90% of the game from the start, and it does nothing to distinguish what's important to the puzzle you're working on and what isn't. Also, solving the animal puzzle, despite revealing an entire age, doesn't actually unlock any new areas or secrets or anything that can assist you in solving this fire marble puzzle. Well, okay, you do get Catherine's journal, which does help a little, if you can read it. Like, seriously, reading cursive is already a challenge for some people, but reading pixelated cursive, it's almost a puzzle in and of itself to figure out what some of these words are. And most of it is just lore and world building, which is valuable in its own way, but not relevant to the puzzle you're caving your head in over. Your success in gaining access to Gen still depends on your ability to catalog, cross-reference, and associate relevant information you presumably already had about the stuff in the world and the people that use it, and then somehow apply what you've learned to figure out where to drop these little marbles on a 25 by 25 grid. It's so convoluted, so many steps are involved that it's honestly a miracle that anyone managed to solve it in 1997. It's a puzzle with one solution and no possible way of brute forcing it. Like, if you were to make 1,000,000 guesses a second, it would still take you almost 2,000 years to get through every iteration. You just have to know the solution to this puzzle, and that depends on understanding the significance of its pieces as parts of the story of Riven. Just like with the animals, learning the world is the same as solving the puzzle. It's a truly ingenious approach to puzzle making, and I don't think they nailed it. I think they just hid too many pieces too well, or left them too ambiguous. But I mean, goddamn did they give it a hell of a shot. Riven's final puzzle is comfortably the most straightforward. It comprises 3 mini-puzzles, each of which is associated with one of the 3 big players in the story: Gen, Catherine, and Atris. It's also the most consequential. Like Myst, Riven has its own slew of endings. All but one are bad endings, and the one you get depends on how you play this final section. Compared to the last 2 big puzzles, this one's a cakewalk. And I actually like that. I think after the veritable labyrinth that was the rest of the game, you should get to just barrel through to the finish. The structure of this final puzzle is a lot more traditional and intuitive. You should only signal Atris after freeing Catherine, and you can only free Catherine after capturing Gen. The game doesn't explicitly forbid you from doing things out of order, but that's good. That means there are genuine stakes here. You can fail, so you should try to get this right, which, if you've been paying attention to the story this far, you probably will. Easily the trickiest step of this puzzle is capturing Gen, and that comes from him having something of a brain. Both you and he are trying to play each other in this moment. You just have to outplay him by using what you know of his character. The freeing Catherine step of the puzzle is actually somewhat of an anomaly in Riven. You're told where a secret code is, you get the secret code, you use the secret code, and that's it, you're done. I call this puzzle an anomaly because, well, it's barely a puzzle in it. I've been going on and on about what the essence of a Riven puzzle is, how you have to know the world in order to solve the puzzle, and this one has all the mystery and intrigue of remembering where you wrote down the password for your work phone. Does it make sense for this puzzle to be this simple and easy? Yeah, Gen would keep the code to Catherine's prison close to him at all times, but it doesn't make it any less underwhelming as an intellectual exercise. The last step, though, the Atris step, now this is where it all comes together. I'm not going to talk about what you do here because it really is a marvelous ending, and if you're a fan of Myst and have never played Riven, you will want to go into this without knowing anything. Just suffice it to say, I can't imagine the game ending any differently. I wish I could call Riven a perfect game, or even as close to perfect as games can get. But I really can't. It is truly one of the most unbeatable games I have ever played. If you can solve the first puzzle without hints or guides or anything besides what the game shows you, no you can't, but goddamn if this isn't one of the most evocative, brain-tickling worlds ever created in this medium. Every single interaction, every location, every room, every frame both hides and reveals the monumental amount of effort and thought and planning and artistry required to manifest a universe with consistent rules and convincing characters, one that blends sci-fi and fantasy, grounded technology, and heady magic so seamlessly. Riven is such a singular creation that I think everyone who loves video games should experience, and I'm so passionate about this because almost no one has. Riven has such a small legacy compared to what I think it deserves. Some monumental shifts in the gaming industry occurred between the release of Myst and Riven. Why would you play a 3D slideshow when the Nintendo 64 came out last year? Why would you pull your hair out over impossible puzzles when you can get your friends to pull their own hair out when you beat them for the 20th time in Mario Kart? Why would you play a slow, plodding game that doesn't have chocobos or a score by Nobuo Uematsu when you could play an exciting game that has both? You can't even get good at Riven. There is no measure of your skill at the game besides, did you solve the puzzle or not? And I wouldn't blame you for wanting to give up on these puzzles. They're just too demanding for how reserved the game is and the amount of help it gives back. But that's the source of my dilemma, because I think that's kind of the point. If you're faced with something incomprehensible in real life, and you don't have any instructions or experts helping you learn what this thing is or how to use it, then your only option is to just figure that shit out. In Riven, you just have to figure that shit out. Riven is not a game for everyone. It doesn't try to be a game for everyone. But if you're a fan of games like Myst, and you've never tried Riven, and you decide you want to commit to it, then I think you're in for one of the most rewarding experiences the medium has to offer. Or you could just play the remake, that's easier. Thanks for watching me ramble about Riven. I'd like to thank my patrons, but I can't because I don't have any. Anyway, if you liked the video, please give it a like, and consider subscribing if you want more content like this. I am planning on making a companion video to this one about the Riven remake, so stay tuned for that. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.